Adrian Cole was not the kind of man people noticed, and he liked it that way. He lived quietly at the edge of Briarwood, a small town tucked between rolling fields and thick forests. His days were simple. Wake early, walk Eli to school, kiss Mara goodbye, and go to his shift at the lumber mill. He was gentle, soft-spoken, never late, never rude. People called him the calm one, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with amusement. But to Adrian, peace was everything. He had seen enough chaos growing up, enough shouting, enough fists, enough storms inside a house that looked peaceful from the outside. He swore that his wife and son would never know that kind of life. For a long time, he kept that promise. Mara adored him, not because he was wealthy or powerful, but because he made her feel safe. And Eli, with his wild curls and big curious eyes, believed Adrian was the strongest man alive. Not because he could lift heavy logs at the mill, but because he never raised his voice, never broke his word, and never walked away from those he loved. Adrian had a small world, but it was everything he ever wanted. But in Briarwood, there was one man who hated that kind of quiet happiness: Dante Riker. Dante was the son of a man who used to own half the town. He inherited the arrogance, but not the discipline. He had money, influence, and a reputation for cruelty that people whispered about but never confronted. Dante was the kind of man who hated seeing others content, especially those he considered beneath him. And Adrian, with his peaceful smile and humble home, irritated him in a way he couldn't quite explain. It started with small things: sarcastic comments, snide jokes, little attempts to provoke him. Adrian ignored them all, not because he was weak, but because he believed giving someone like Dante a reaction was like feeding a stray wolf. The wolf would only come back hungrier. But Dante didn't stop. Bullies rarely do when their target remains silent, and each time Adrian walked away, Dante grew bolder. The final straw came on the day of the Briarwood Harvest Festival, a day meant for celebration, for families, for laughter. Adrian arrived with Mara and Eli, carrying homemade pies, smiling with pride, ready to enjoy a day that reminded him life was still good. But Dante saw him. He walked over with 3 of his friends, all of them swaggering like roosters in front of a crowd. They called out to Adrian, loudly enough for everyone to hear. He tried to ignore them, turning toward the game stalls, but they blocked his path. One of them snatched Adrian's hat and tossed it into the mud, while Dante poured a drink over his shirt. Laughter erupted around them, light at first, then heavier, meaner. Someone shouted, "The quiet man can't even defend himself." Eli watched his father being humiliated, confusion turning into fear, then disappointment. Mara tried to step forward, but Adrian held her hand and whispered, "Let's just go home." He walked away with wet clothes, muddy shoes, and a broken dignity. Dante smirked after him, satisfied. He believed he had proved something. Perhaps he believed he had shown the town who the stronger man was. But humiliation is a seed. Sometimes it grows into silence, and sometimes silence grows into a storm.
2 weeks later, the night smelled strange when Adrian walked home from his shift. The air felt heavy, almost bitter. He turned onto his street and froze. Smoke curled into the sky from his home. Flames flickered through the windows like hungry beasts. He ran, he screamed, he shouted Mara's name, Eli's name, but the house roared louder with each passing second. Neighbors gathered, helpless, calling the fire department, trying to hold him back as he fought against the heat, desperate to get inside. By the time the fire died, Adrian's world was gone. Mara and Eli's bodies were found close together, as though she had shielded their son until the final breath. The coroner said they suffocated before the flames reached them. That was supposed to be comforting. It wasn't. The sheriff called it an accident, a faulty wire, a tragedy of fate. But Adrian knew better. The moment he saw a small, partially burned matchbox among the ashes, blackened but still readable. It belonged to the Riker family hunting lodge. Something inside him cracked. Not loud, not sudden. Quietly. Like a bone breaking beneath the skin. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He didn't collapse. He simply stopped being the man he once was. Adrian disappeared from public life. He sold what was left of his belongings, left his job at the mill without a word, and retreated to an old woodworking shop on the outskirts of Briarwood. It had been abandoned for years, a place no one visited. But at night, lights flickered through its dusty windows. People whispered about strange sounds, saws, tools, footsteps at odd hours. Some said Adrian was building furniture to distract himself. Others said he was going mad from grief. But Adrian wasn't losing his mind. He was sharpening it. Every night he studied, not books of comfort, but manuals, articles, old newspapers, anything that taught him how fires spread, how locks worked, how to move silently, how to track a man. The world had taken everything from him. He would not let it take justice, too. He told himself he wasn't becoming cruel. He was becoming clear. He wasn't seeking blood. He was seeking balance. The first man to disappear was Marcus Hale, Dante's driver, the one who always followed orders, even the ugly ones. Adrian waited for him at an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town. Marcus never saw him coming. When he woke tied to a chair, he recognized him immediately. His fear was instant and uncontrollable. Adrian didn't torture him. He didn't hit him. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply asked one question. Who lit the fire? Marcus broke within minutes. He confessed it all, how Dante wanted to teach Adrian a lesson, how they thought starting a fire outside would scare him, how they never meant it for it to spread, how they ran when it got out of control. Marcus sobbed as he apologized. Adrian didn't kill him. He wasn't after followers. He was after the man who led them. And so Dante's world began to crumble. One by one, his friends vanished or met accidents, not fatal but terrifying. One woke with a broken hand and a message carved into the wood beside him. You took my world, now I'll take yours. Another found his home burned down, though he escaped. Another fled down entirely, shaking whenever someone said Adrian's name. Dante tried to act fearless. He strutted through town, claiming he wasn't afraid. But his eyes told another story. They darted at every sound, every shadow. He slept with lights on. He drank more, shouted more, threatened more. But it didn't matter. Adrian was patient. Rage makes some men reckless, but Adrian made him colder, calculated. Eventually, Dante fled to the only place he thought Adrian wouldn't dare follow, the Riker family mountain lodge, deep in the forest, isolated, protected by height and distance. But darkness travels far when it has purpose. Adrian reached the lodge on a cold, moonless night. The guards Dante hired were asleep, or pretending to be. It didn't matter. Adrian walked past them silently, almost like a ghost. Inside the lodge, Dante sat at a table. gun trembling in his hand, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. When Adrian entered, Dante tried to speak, tried to justify, tried to lie, tried to beg, all in the same breath. Adrian didn't shout, he didn't strike. He simply placed a charred photograph of Mara and Eli on the table between them. "Say their names," he whispered. But Dante couldn't. Cowards often lose their tongues when truth stands in front of them.
Adrian lit a single match. Dante screamed, but Adrian didn't move. The match dropped from his fingers and landed on the alcohol-soaked floorboards. Flames spread instantly, climbing the walls, swallowing the air. Dante tried to run, but Adrian pushed him back. He didn't hit him, he just held him there, as if saying, "You stay, you watch, you feel." The fire roared, Dante begged, Adrian remained silent. He had become the very thing that destroyed him, a force without mercy. When the cabin collapsed, the silence that followed was heavier than the smoke. 2 bodies were found in the debris, or what was left of them. One hand clutched a burned photograph. The sheriff called it a tragic ending to a long conflict. The town called it justice. Some whispered that Adrian became a monster. Others whispered he became a martyr. But the truth was simpler. Adrian was a peaceful man, pushed past the edge of what a human heart can endure. And in the end, the moral of his story settled over Briarwood like a cold wind. Humiliation is not harmless. It is not a joke. It is not entertainment. When you humiliate a peaceful man, you gamble with a storm you do not understand. What you break in a man's spirit, you may never be able to repair. And when the consequences come, they rarely knock gently. The peaceful man may endure. He may forgive. He may walk away. But if you take everything from him, his dignity, his hope, his family, you may leave behind only the one thing he never wanted to release, his rage.